My name is Marlowe Keane. I'm 29, a former Broadway understudy turned high school drama teacher in Maplewood, New Jersey. Most days I smell like paint and sawdust. Most nights I grade monologues with a mug of peppermint tea cooling beside my elbow. I tell my students that theater is a truth-telling machine. I don't tell them that truth can be stolen, repackaged, and applauded in a tuxedoed room far away from where it was born. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of afternoon that turns the school's brick walls into honey when the sun hits just right. We were blocking Act Two of our fall play when Jasmine, my stage manager, human espresso shot, burst from the wings with her phone in the air. "Ms. Keane, you have to see this," she said, breathless. "Tony nominations breaking news." I laughed. Jazz, we're trying to figure out how not to burn down the auditorium with those lanterns. She insisted, thumbs flying. No, no, this one is look. On her screen, a glossy headline scrolled by, fat with congratulations. Best Scenic Concept and Staging, Victor Hale for Indigo City. My stomach clenched. The name hit me first. Victor Hale. I tasted old air from rehearsal rooms in Midtown. I heard the scratch of a pencil in a spiral notebook that used to live in my backpack like a second vertebra. Congrats to the visionary staging that frames a confrontation on an empty subway platform with a cracked light above a scarlet bench. Jasmine read aloud. That's such a mood. Scarlet bench. I had written those words in my notebook 3 years ago. Empty platform. Fluorescent flicker. One scarlet bench. The line between confession and performance blurs. I felt my feet lose the floor. For a second the stage tilted, or maybe it was just me. Another breath, and the auditorium snapped back into place. Dusty velvet seats, the faint smell of last week's fog machine, Jasmine's confused eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied, gentle as a prop feather. "Take 5, everyone." Students scattered, their laughter ricocheting off the rafters. I sat on the edge of the stage, the same way I'd sit on subway platforms when the city and I shared a heartbeat. Victor had been the producer on a workshop I understudied back then. We all believed we were building something new. We all handed him pieces of ourselves because he was the one with the keys to funding, to theaters, to rooms where doors didn't even look like doors until he opened them. And I'm hungry, underpaid, desperate to be indispensable, shared my notebook. "Just sketches," I'd said, the night we all drank lukewarm Prosecco after a run-through. "Scene ideas. Images. If any of it helps, take it." "Take it," he'd echoed, smiling like he'd discovered the cure for obscurity. "You're a real one, Marlowe." Later, the show closed quietly, the workshop dissolved, and I spiraled into side gigs, pulled groins, and the kind of bills that never stop being surprised you exist. Teaching landed like a lifeboat. I found a version of joy I didn't know I'd earned, the kind that smells like fresh lumber and the inside of a box of chalk. But that scarlet bench, the meaning of it, the humiliation and intimacy of it never left me. It was the color of the admission you don't want to make, a bruise you decide to showcase. It was mine. Now it was nominated. My phone buzzed. A text from Danny, an old castmate turned barista, exploded with fireworks emojis. "Victor freaking Hale! Did you see? Indigo City. The platform scene is blowing up on Theater Talk." I typed, deleted, typed again. "Where did he workshop it?" "Couple downtown spaces." Then it went private, VIP. "Rumor says he brought in new blood for concepting." New blood. I stared at the ceiling grid, at the single dead bulb we never replaced because it made the corners moody. When rehearsal resumed, I called for a reading of the final scene. Jasmine tapped the light cue. The dead bulb flickered, as if it knew I was listening harder than I ever had. Amari, my lead, climbed onto a battered bench we'd painted a stubborn red. "Where do you go when the city spits you out?" he whispered. The line wasn't mine, but the staging was. The echo of that color drew a line through my chest. After they left, I locked the doors and let the quiet settle. The stage felt conspiratorial, like it wanted to confess too. I pulled my old spiral notebook from my tote. The cover was blistered from years of being dragged through audition rooms. I flipped to the page. Scene. The platform. Scarlet bench. One broken light. A confession disguised as a monologue disguised as a confession. The date in the corner was a ghost of graphite. I ran my finger over it until the numbers smudged like tears. What did I want? A lawsuit I couldn't afford? A tweet that would get buried under 100 thirst traps and 3 choreographed dances? I wanted my name back. I wanted the story to know it had a mother. I recorded a voice memo, because sometimes the fastest way to keep a feeling from running away is to trap it in audio. "This is Marlowe," I whispered. "Today I learned that a scene I wrote dreamed was nominated for a Tony under someone else's name." Footsteps in the hallway. Custodial staff probably. Or the theater gods taking pity by sending me small jump scares. My phone pinged again. "Danny, there's a clip on Theater Talk. The platform. It's your shot list." I clicked. A handheld video from a balcony. A woman in a cobalt coat stepping into a pool of dirty light, the bench like a wound behind her. She starts, stops, starts again. The way confessions trip over pride. My scene. She turned to the audience and for a second her face blurred. I recognized the pause I had written it as a full 2 beats. The caption said, "Victor Hale's genius framing. Genius." I wanted to throw my phone into the orchestra pit to watch it smack the carpet with a gratifying thud. Instead, I breathed. "Okay," I said to the empty seats. "Okay." I thought about my kids. Last week, Amari confessed that theater kept him from going home early to a house that didn't feel safe. Jasmine said the booth was the only place she could be loud without being seen. They needed a fight that wasn't about winning a statue. They needed a lesson in naming things. I spent the night cross-legged on the stage, photocopying old pages, exporting timestamps from cloud backups, lining everything up like evidence on a procedural show. My notebook. Drafts emailed to myself. Voice memos that began with subway rumble and ended with a cracking whisper. Around 11, I called my sister Rowan, who became a social worker because she likes to bring fires a glass of water. "He did what?" she asked, steady fury simmering. "Used my scene. The platform with the scarlet bench." Long pause. "What do you need from me?" Her voice was a hand hovering near my back support without pushing. "I don't know yet," I said. I can't let him build a legacy on my bones." Rowan breathed in like she was measuring me. "Then we make sure people know who laid the foundation," she said. "But you decide the cost." After we hung up, I walked the aisles. Seat 12A had a wobble. Seat 15C held a heart sticker someone peeled and stuck there, a tiny red echo. I stood center stage, under the dead bulb. "Do you want me to fight?" I asked the room. "Do you want me to teach them how to fight?" Silence answered, big and holy. The next morning, the school felt like it had been reframed. Every poster on the bulletin board was a story about a name. Chess club, debate team, poetry slam. Names, names, names. I walked into the theater and found a package leaning against the door. No return address. Inside, tissue paper crinkled like gossip. I unwrapped a playbill from Indigo City, glossy and smug. A sticky note clung to the cover. "For your collection, V.V." I flipped it open. There, buried in a sea of serif font, in a corner no one reads, a line winked like a bruise. "Special thanks to M.K." He had left breadcrumbs, a lawyer's fig leaf. Special thanks. You can't sue a shadow. Heat crawled up my neck. I threw the playbill onto the seat with the heart sticker, and it landed face down, V staring at the floor. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. His voice was smooth enough to pour. Marlowe. It's Victor. Congratulations are in order for both of us. I trust you got my gift. Let's keep the past in the past, yes? You wouldn't want this to get messy. The message ended with silence so confident it felt like a grin. My pulse became a metronome. I stared at the stage, at the red bench we'd dragged in from a thrift store and painted in 3 coats. Messy, I repeated, and the word felt like wet paint under my tongue. Jasmine cracked the door and peeked in. You good, Ms. Keane? I smiled, and it felt like the lift before a high note. I think, I said, we're about to put on a show he can't control. A text popped up from an unknown number, just a single sentence. He did the same thing to me. I looked at the playbill, at the bench, at the dead bulb that winked like a witness. Then I opened the text, typed, "Tell me everything," and hit send just as the house lights flickered and the entire theater went dark. I wasn't alone, and he wasn't either. The truth wanted an audience. When the house lights went black, my first thought was, he cut the power. Ridiculous. I know. Victor didn't control Maplewood High's breaker box, but fear doesn't check facts. It paints shadows on the walls until they look like threats. Ms. Keane? Jasmine's voice was a small flashlight in the dark. I'm here, I said, steadying my breath. Phones out, everyone, flashlights on. Beams clicked alive. The stage became a constellation of LED stars. Students giggled nervously, their faces glowing blue. I forced calm into my voice. It's just the grid. Facilities will reset it. But in my chest, something colder thrummed. What if he knows I won't stay quiet? That night, I couldn't sleep. I played Victor's voicemail on loop until his words felt like fingerprints pressed against my ribs. You wouldn't want this to get messy. Messy was code for ruin. He knew the system better than I ever would. Producers build walls out of lawyers, agents, and favors. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. The unknown number, the one that had texted, he did the same thing to me. This time, it was a name. Elodie, actor. He stole my monologue. I typed back before I could lose courage. Meet me tomorrow, after rehearsal. Maplewood High, stage door. The next day, I taught Macbeth soliloquies with a smile stretched thin as tape. After dismissal, I waited at the stage door. At 5:12, a woman appeared, long coat, hair tucked in a messy bun, eyes carrying miles of exhaustion. You're Marlowe? She asked. Yes. Elodie? She nodded. We shook hands, the grip tight, almost desperate. We sat on the scarlet bench center stage. Somehow, it felt right, like we were both confessing to the same priest. She pulled out a battered script. This was mine. Senior showcase at Tisch. I wrote it. One-woman piece about grief. Victor saw it at a student festival. Next season, it appeared in his workshop. Same beats, same rhythm. He even kept my line about memory tasting like copper. Her eyes burned. I didn't fight. I was nobody. Who would believe me over Victor Hale? The words cracked something open inside me. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just theft. It was a pattern. A harvest. He'd been feeding on young artists for years. I whispered, he builds his empire on bones. Elodie nodded. And no one sees the graveyard. That night, we sat in my classroom with diner fries spread between us, sketching names of people he'd wronged. Elodie remembered a lighting designer whose concept became Victor's visionary palette. I remembered a choreographer who vanished mid-project after he absorbed her work. We made a list. By midnight, the list had 10 names. By 1 a.m., 15. It was no longer about my scarlet bench. It was about every scar he'd turned into wallpaper. Elodie leaned back, wiping salt from her fingers. What's your plan? I looked at the notebook on my desk, the one with subway sketches, graphite ghosts. We stage it, I said. The original. In public. With receipts. Not just my scene everyone's. A show built from what he stole. We make the graveyard sing. She stared at me, lips parted. Then she laughed, half disbelief, half hunger. You want to drag him on stage? Yes, I said. In front of the world. Of course it wasn't that simple. My students were talented, but kids. We didn't have funding. We didn't have a venue outside the high school auditorium. And most of all, we didn't have protection. Victor could crush us with a cease and desist before the first curtain. I wrestled with doubt for days. Every time I started rehearsals, I saw their hopeful faces and wondered if I was leading them into a war they couldn't survive. But then Amari pulled me aside after class. Ms. Keane, he said softly, I saw your notebook on the desk. That Scarlet Bench sketch? That's yours, right? I hesitated. Yes. He nodded. Then let's show them. People need to know whose story they're clapping for. Out of the mouths of teenagers struth as blunt as a stage slap. The first rehearsal of Project Graveyard, as we nicknamed it, was electric. Elodie read her stolen monologue, trembling at first, then steadying with each line until the words filled the room like thunder. My students watched in awe. Raw truth has a different voltage than anything in a textbook. Jasmine whispered to me, "This isn't school theater. This is revolution." I smiled, but fear coiled in my stomach. Revolution has casualties. Still, we kept going. We stitched together scenes, mine with the Scarlet Bench, Elodie's monologue, fragments from others who answered our calls. Each rehearsal felt like pulling threads from the dark, weaving a tapestry of betrayal into something fierce and alive. A week later, I got another voicemail. Victor again. Marlowe, I hear you've been busy. Careful, darling. Ambition is a dangerous drug. Remember, I gave you a seat at the table once. Don't flip it over now. I deleted it, but his voice stayed lodged in my chest. Was I reckless? Or righteous? Did I care anymore? That night, Elodie texted me a flyer mock-up. Indigo City versus the originals, one night only. I stared at it, pulse hammering. If we did this, there was no turning back. I thought of my students, my sister, the dead bulb above the Scarlet Bench. I thought of Victor's grin, smug in his playbill. Then I texted her back. Let's set the date. And that's when everything truly began. Because the moment we made it real, Victor found out. And he wasn't going to let us have our stage without a fight. The flyer went live on a chilly Thursday night. Jasmine posted it to the drama club's Instagram with a caption, "What belongs to us will not be stolen again. One night only. Witness the originals." By Friday morning, my inbox was on fire. Messages from strangers, anonymous DMs, a flood of theater kids, alumni, even professionals whispering, "He stole from me too." Some sent PDFs, rehearsal clips, scribbled notebooks photographed under kitchen lights. The graveyard was bigger than I'd imagined. A whole cemetery of creativity buried under Victor Hale's name. But not everyone was supportive. The principal called me into his office that afternoon. He slid the flyer across his desk as if it were contraband. "Marlowe, what is this?" he asked, his tone more weary than angry. "A performance," I said evenly. "The truth." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "The board is nervous. They don't want lawsuits. Hale has money. Connections. I cut him off. So he gets to rob us in silence?" His eyes softened. "I'm saying, protect yourself. If he comes after you legally, the school won't shield you." Walking out of that office, my chest felt hollow and hot at the same time. Even here, I thought. Even in this little town, his shadow stretches long enough to smother me. That night, Elodie and I met at the diner again. The neon sign buzzed above us like an anxious heartbeat. "Hell try to shut us down," she said, dunking fries into ketchup. "He already is," I answered. The principal basically told me I'm on my own. She smirked bitterly. Welcome to the club. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of other people's lives. Then she leaned closer. I know someone. A lawyer. She used to do contract work for theaters before she burned out. She hates Victor. If we can get her on board, maybe we survive this without being crushed. I gripped her hand across the sticky diner table. Call her. Please. The lawyer's name was Celeste. She showed up at our next rehearsal in ripped jeans, a leather jacket, and a tote bag stuffed with folders. She looked like she belonged backstage, not in a courtroom. I can't promise you victory, she said, dropping her bag onto the scarlet bench. But I can promise him hell. She outlined the plan. As long as we framed this as an educational showcase, Victor couldn't legally gag us without drawing press. And trust me, she said, he doesn't want journalists sniffing around his history of inspiration. Elodie grinned for the first time in days. I felt my lungs expand like I'd been holding my breath since October. We had protection, or at least a shield strong enough to buy us time. Rehearsals intensified. My students poured themselves into the stolen material with ferocity. Amari delivered Elodie's monologue like he'd been born in grief. Jasmine built light cues that carved the stage into confessionals. For the first time, I saw the stolen pieces alive the way they were meant to be, not polished into Victor's slick showcase, but raw, jagged, breathing. Still, cracks formed. One night, Amari pulled me aside, whispering, "My mom doesn't want me in this anymore. She says Hale's powerful, and she's scared he'll blackball me from college programs." The words knifed through me. I wanted to promise safety, but how could I? Instead, I told him the truth. You have to choose, Amari. No shame either way. But if you say no, this is bigger than theater. This is about ownership of your voice. He looked at me, eyes fierce despite the fear. Then I stay. A week before opening, Victor himself arrived. I was in the auditorium, coaching a scene, when the doors swung open and there he was. Expensive coat, teeth too white, confidence dripping like cologne. "Ah, Marlowe," he said, voice loud enough to echo. "Still playing teacher?" Every student froze. The air thickened with tension. I stepped forward, heart pounding. "What do you want, Victor?" He smiled like we were old friends. "To save you from yourself. Cancel this little rebellion. I'll even give you an associate credit on my next project." Generous, no? Elodie appeared from the wings like a storm cloud. "You parasite," she hissed. He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the Tish girl. Still bitter?" My fists clenched. The scarlet bench behind me seemed to glow hotter, as if urging me forward. "We're not canceling," I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "You stole from us. All of us. And now we're telling the world." His smile vanished. For the first time, I saw the cold steel under his charm. "You'll regret this, Marlowe," he whispered, leaning close enough for only me to hear. "I ruin people. It's what I do best." He turned and strode out, his footsteps like a countdown. When the doors shut, silence swallowed the room. My students looked at me, wide-eyed. Jasmine finally broke it. "Ms. Keane, what if he's right?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. But I knew one thing. Regret or not, the show was happening. And as I stared at the scarlet bench under the dead bulb, I felt the weight of a choice pressing harder than ever. This wasn't just theater anymore. This was war. The week before the show felt like living inside a storm. Emails poured in, some cheering us on, others warning me to stop before Victor buried me. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, half expecting a cease and desist. Celeste kept us calm. She turned the auditorium into her war room, legal pads spread across the scarlet bench, sticky notes climbing the wall like ivy. "Remember," she said, pacing with a pen between her teeth. If Hale tries to shut you down, the optics will destroy him. No one wants to look like the Goliath stomping on a high school drama club. Easy to say, harder to believe. 3 days before curtain, Amari broke down during rehearsal. He'd been flawless, carrying Elodie's monologue with raw power, but mid-line, he froze. His voice cracked. Tears welled. "Sorry," he whispered, bolting off stage. I found him in the wings, sitting on a coil of extension cords. "I can't do it," he choked. "What if he ruins my future? What if everyone laughs at me for fighting a battle that isn't even mine?" I knelt beside him, my heart breaking. "Amari, this is your battle. Every time you tell a story that's yours, you claim your voice. Victor wants us silent because silence keeps him safe." He wiped his face. "I'm scared." "So am I admitted. "But maybe fear is the ticket price for truth." For the first time, he smiled through tears. "That sounds like a line in a play." "Maybe it will be," I said. 2 nights later, Elodie came to me shaking. She'd gotten a message from an anonymous account. "If you go through with this, we'll ruin you." I felt fury rise like a tide. "He's trying to scare us. That's all." Celeste wasn't so calm. "Don't underestimate him. He plays dirty." Elodie's hands trembled. "I don't want to back down, Marlowe. But what if he hurts my career even worse?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was clasp her hand and whisper, "We stand together. That's the only armor we've got." Finally, opening night arrived. The auditorium smelled of dust and adrenaline. Students ran queues with frantic energy. Parents filed in, holding programs printed on the school copier. I stood backstage, notebook pressed against my chest like a shield. This was it. Months of fear, fury, and fire had led here. As the house lights dimmed, I felt Victor's shadow looming. I scanned the crowd from behind the curtain, and there he was. Front row. Perfect suit. Arms crossed, eyes glittering like knives. He came to watch us burn. My throat tightened. For a heartbeat, I thought of stopping the show, calling it all off, protecting my kids. Then Jasmine squeezed my hand. "We're ready, Ms. Keane." The overture began low, pulsing, like a heartbeat amplified. The curtain rose, and the war started. The curtain lifted, and silence fell heavy. Spotlight on the scarlet bench, a single flickering bulb. The audience leaned forward, confused but curious. Amari stepped out first. His hands trembled, but his voice carried. "Where do you go when the city spits you out?" The line rippled through the room. A few gasps. Someone whispered, "That's Indigo City." Yes. They recognized it. But this time, it wasn't Victor's slick Broadway packaging. It was raw, bleeding truth. Piece after piece unfolded. Elodie's monologue thundered through the auditorium. She shook, then steadied, the words tasting like fire on her tongue. Scenes poured out like confessions, the stolen lighting concept, the choreography, my subway platform, each performed by students who gave more than technique. They gave rage, sorrow, defiance. The audience shifted. Some leaned forward, rapt. Others looked uneasy, glancing at Victor in the front row. He didn't flinch. He sat still, jaw tight, pretending none of this mattered. But I saw the vein pulsing in his temple. Halfway through, the power flickered. The stage lights dimmed, then surged. My stomach dropped. Was it sabotage? Jasmine, from the booth, kept the show alive with her flashlight, cueing actors by hand. The students didn't stop. They shouted lines into the dark until the lights returned, brighter than before. The audience erupted in applause, not at the lines, but at their refusal to quit. Victor shifted, for the first time. His mask cracked. When the final scene began, my scarlet bench time slowed. I walked onto the stage myself. Gasps rippled. Teachers don't usually perform in their students' shows. I sat on the bench, opened my old notebook, and began to read. These words were written 3 years ago in the back of a rehearsal hall that smelled of sweat and cheap champagne. They were mine. They are mine still. I read every line: the subway, the confession, the scarlet bench. My voice shook, then strengthened. I didn't act. I testified. By the time I finished, the auditorium was silent. You could hear a chair creak, a breath catch. Then, thunder. Applause so loud it shook the walls. Victor stood, not to clap, but to leave. His face was carved in stone. He slipped out the side door, swallowed by the dark. Backstage, chaos erupted. Students hugged, cried, shouted. Elodie collapsed into my arms. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." But Celeste wasn't smiling. She held up her phone. "Brace yourself. He's already moving." On the screen, a tweet from Victor. "Shameful to see young artists manipulated by bitterness. Art belongs to everyone. Let's not weaponize it." Hundreds of likes. Thousands within minutes. His spin machine was awake. My victory tasted sweet for only a second. Now the war had spilled online, and Victor had an army. Victor's tweets spread like wildfire. By morning, theater blogs were buzzing. Some sided with him, calling us angry amateurs. Others defended us, dubbing the show The Reckoning at Maplewood. I scrolled obsessively, my fingers numb. Every comment felt like a punch or a hug. "You're jealous nobodies. You're heroes. You're liars. You're brave." Truth and lies braided together until I couldn't tell which thread I was holding. Celeste urged us to lean into the chaos. "Attention is leverage," she said. "If he wants this fight online, then fine, we give him the receipts." That afternoon, we filmed a video. Elodie, Amari, Jasmine, and I sat on the scarlet bench under the dead bulb. I held up my notebook, flipping to the subway sketches. Elodie showed her battered script. Jasmine pulled up old lighting drafts on her laptop. One by one, we told our stories. Calm, precise. No shouting, no venom, just facts and the weight of memory. We ended the video with a single line. "These creations had parents. Don't let them be orphans." We posted it. Then we waited. The video went viral within hours. Theater talk exploded. College students duetted with us, holding up their own stolen works. Hashtags trended. The originals, credit the creator, bench scene truth. For the first time, Victor was on the defensive. He released another statement. "I nurture young artists. To accuse me of theft is cruel and unfounded." But the internet wasn't buying it anymore. Screenshots surfaced: emails, text messages, rehearsal notes credited to others but stamped with his name. The graveyard we'd uncovered was now a parade, marching loud and undeniable. Still, the backlash took its toll. Parents called the school, furious that their kids were being dragged into scandal. The board summoned me, demanding an explanation. "You're putting our reputation at risk," they said. I wanted to laugh. Their reputation? What about mine, already shredded once by his theft? Rowan, my sister, stood by me. She came to a board meeting, arms crossed, her voice steady as she said, "You're worried about lawsuits. I'm worried about kids learning silence when they should be learning courage." For once, they had no reply. 2 nights later, another message appeared on my phone. Unknown number again. "He's planning something bigger. Be careful." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Was it Elodie's contact? Another victim? Or Victor himself taunting me? That night, as I locked up the auditorium, I found another package at the stage door. No return address. Inside, a shredded notebook. Not mine. Someone else's. Pages ripped out, smudged with pen marks. On the first page, scrawled in angry red, "See what happens when you cross me." I sank onto the scarlet bench, clutching the torn notebook. Fear coiled in my gut. He was escalating. This wasn't just about reputation anymore. It was intimidation, pure and sharp. The theater creaked around me. Shadows deepened. For the first time, I wondered if we were safe. And then my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Victor's voice, low and deliberate. Marlowe. The curtain always falls. The question is, will you be standing when it does? The message ended. The silence after was louder than thunder. I didn't sleep that night. The shredded notebook sat on my kitchen table like a corpse. I couldn't stop staring at it, wondering whose words Victor had destroyed. He wanted me scared. He wanted me silenced. But instead, fear hardened into something else, a vow. By dawn, I decided, if he wanted war, he'd get it. Not in whispers, not in shadows. On the biggest stage we could find. The next day, I called Celeste, Elodie, and Jasmine into the theater. "Hay's escalating," I told them, holding up the ruined notebook. "So we escalate too." Celeste frowned. "Careful, Marlowe. Escalation means risk." "I know," I said. "But we can't just play defense. We have to show the world the scale of what he's done." Elodie's eyes burned. "Then what's the move?" I looked around our shabby auditorium, the chipped paint, the rattling lights, the scarlet bench that had become our altar. "We take this beyond Maplewood. We stream it. Everywhere." At first, silence. Then Jasmine's grin spread wide. "I can rig it," she said. "Multiple cameras, live broadcast on YouTube and TikTok. People will watch." Celeste exhaled slowly. "If you do this, Victor won't just be angry, he'll be cornered. Cornered men are dangerous." I nodded. So are cornered women. For the next week, the auditorium turned into a fortress of wires and tripods. Jasmine recruited tech club kids. Elodie reached out to theater activists online. Support poured in offers of graphics, editing, promotion. It wasn't just our show anymore. It was a movement. Meanwhile, Victor's smear campaign grew louder. Articles painted me as a bitter ex-actress. Anonymous accounts flooded our posts with insults. Some nights, I broke down in the dark, terrified I'd ruined not just my career, but my students' futures. Rowan held me through the worst of it. "He's trying to break you, Mar," she whispered. "That's how bullies survive. You don't break, you bend, then you build." Her words stitched me back together enough to keep going. The night of the live stream came fast. We had one chance. One performance to beam the truth into thousands of living rooms. The kids buzzed backstage, half terrified, half electric. Elodie paced, clutching her script. Celeste checked her phone like a general awaiting enemy fire. As I adjusted the microphone clip to my sweater, Amari caught my arm. "Ms. Keane," he said, voice trembling but eyes steady. "Whatever happens, thank you. For fighting." I swallowed hard. "No, Amari. Thank you. For staying." The livestream began. Viewers poured in hundreds, then thousands, the chat scrolling too fast to read. Hashtags lit up again, the originals bench scene. Truth. We performed with everything we had. Tears streamed down faces, voices cracked, hands shook, but none of it mattered. It was raw, it was alive, and it was ours. Halfway through, the stream glitched. The feed froze for 5 agonizing seconds. My heart stopped. Sabotage again? Then it snapped back, and the chat exploded with, "Don't stop. We see you. Keep going." And we did. When the final applause roared through speakers worldwide, my phone lit up with messages. Journalists, fellow artists, strangers thanking us for giving them courage. But beneath the flood of support came one final text. From Victor himself. "You think you've won, but I haven't even started." My blood turned cold, because I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the ugliest act yet. The morning after the live stream, our story was everywhere. News outlets ran headlines: high school drama teacher challenges, Tony-nominated producer. Talk shows debated whether we were whistleblowers or attention seekers. For a moment, it felt like victory, but victory is fragile. That same afternoon, the school superintendent called me into his office. His voice was clipped, formal. "Marlowe, you're on administrative leave effective immediately. Pending investigation." My ears rang. Investigation into what? Misuse of school resources, unauthorized performances, public controversy damaging the district's reputation. It wasn't hard to guess who had pushed this. Victor's fingerprints were all over it. I walked out of that office numb. My students gathered around me in the hallway, whispering questions. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Keep rehearsing," I told them. "This isn't over." But inside, I was breaking. Teaching was the one steady branch I'd clung to after Broadway crumbled. Now, even that was being cut away. Rowan found me that night, sitting on the scarlet bench alone in the dark auditorium. "They suspended me," I whispered. She sat beside me, eyes fierce. "Then we take it outside the school. Bigger venue, bigger spotlight." I shook my head. "They'll crush me, Ro." She grabbed my hand. "Not if you let everyone see them trying." Celeste called with more bad news. "Victor's lawyers are filing injunctions. He's desperate. But desperation makes mistakes." Her voice sharpened. "If we keep pressing, he might unravel in public. And that's what will finish him. Not lawsuits, not us. Him exposing himself." It sounded good in theory, but I'd already lost my job. My students were scared. My life felt like it was burning down around me. Still, something inside me whispered, "This is the fire you have to walk through." The next week, we staged another performance, this time in the town square. No school rules, no board oversight. Just us, microphones, and a sea of folding chairs donated by neighbors who believed in what we were doing. Crowds gathered. Local press rolled cameras. Even strangers from other towns showed up, holding signs that read, "Credit the creator," and "Truth on stage." Victor's shadow was everywhere. I half expected him to appear in the audience smirking, but he didn't. Not this time. Instead, halfway through the performance, a drone buzzed overhead. Small, black, hovering like an eye. Jasmine cursed under her breath. "That's him. He's recording us." The drone dipped lower, its red light blinking like a warning. The audience stirred nervously. Elodie whispered, "What do we do?" I looked straight into the lens, and I spoke. "Art belongs to those who bleed for it, not to the vultures who feed on it." The crowd erupted. The drone jerked upward and vanished, but I knew Victor had heard every word. That night, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Victor's voice slid through the speaker, calm but edged. "You're making a mistake, Marlowe. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. And I promise I'll be the one to watch you hit the ground." He hung up. I sat in the dark, clutching my phone, my pulse racing. Because for the first time, I wasn't just fighting for my name. I was fighting for survival. The days after the town square performance blurred into a fever. Everywhere I went, people stopped me. Grocery stores, coffee shops, even the post office's strangers pressed my hand and whispered, "Keep going." But with the support came fear. My mailbox overflowed with letters, some anonymous, some threatening. One note, scrawled in black marker, "Shut up before you disappear." I carried it to Celeste. She scanned it, jaw tightening. "He's rattled. But the more he pushes, the more he proves your point. Document everything. Do not hide." Meanwhile, the students grew restless. Amari asked one afternoon, "Ms. Keane, how far are we going with this? I mean, are we just fighting him, or are we trying to change the whole industry?" The question floored me, because I didn't know the answer. At first, it was about my scarlet bench. Then it became about our stolen work. Now, it felt like we were carrying every silenced artist on our shoulders. I looked at him, my voice soft. Maybe both. He nodded slowly. Then let's not stop halfway. That night, Elodie texted me a link. A leaked recording Victor on a phone call with another producer. His voice was unmistakable. Don't worry, I own her. She's nothing but a failed actress hiding in a high school. Once I bury her, no one else will dare speak up. I played it over and over until the words etched into my skull. Failed actress. Nothing. The anger it lit in me was brighter than any spotlight. We decided to strike back. With Celeste's guidance, we sent the recording to a journalist at a major arts magazine. Within days, the article dropped. The Dark Side of Victor Hale, Voices from the Graveyard. It spread like wildfire. Former collaborators came forward, some with names, others anonymously. Stories of stolen designs, plagiarized scripts, manipulative contracts. The graveyard had never been louder. Victor responded with fury. His lawyers filed defamation suits. His PR team blasted out glossy press releases calling him a mentor of the next generation. But the tide had shifted. For the first time, he was the one scrambling. Then came the breaking point. 2 nights before our next performance, as we rehearsed in the auditorium, a brick smashed through a window. Glass scattered across the stage. A note was tied to it, the handwriting jagged and furious. The stage is mine. Stop before I take it back. The students screamed. Jasmine dropped her clipboard. Amari froze, eyes wide. I picked up the note with shaking hands. My blood boiled, but beneath the rage, fear coiled tight. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was danger. Rowan insisted we call the police. They came, took photos, filed a report, promised patrols. But their eyes said what their words didn't. They couldn't protect us from someone like Victor. That night, I sat alone in the theater, the scarlet bench glowing under the fractured light from the broken window. For the first time, I wondered if this would destroy us before it saved us. And then, from the shadows, a voice. You're not alone, Marlowe. I turned. Elodie stepped forward, her face pale but her eyes blazing. Behind her, Amari, Jasmine, and half the cast emerged from the wings. We're in this with you? Jasmine said firmly. All the way, Amari added. I looked at them students, my allies, my family, and felt something stronger than fear take root. If Victor wanted war, then war he would get. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. The night after the brick attack, I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like an intruder. Every gust of wind sounded like Victor's voice. But by dawn, exhaustion gave way to clarity. We couldn't hide. If he wanted to scare us off, the only answer was to step even further into the light. When I walked into the auditorium that morning, the students were already there. They'd gathered without me. Amari leading warm-ups, Jasmine running sound checks, Elodie pacing with her script. It hit me. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was theirs too. Celeste arrived with news. Another journalist reached out. She said, dropping her bag on the scarlet bench. National coverage this time. They want to film the next performance. The room erupted. Some cheered, others gasped nervously. Amari whispered, National-like? The whole country? Yes, Celeste replied. But it cuts both ways. If you stumble, Victor will spin it as proof that you're amateurs out of your depth. The weight of that truth pressed on all of us. But then Jasmine grinned. So we don't stumble. We poured ourselves into rehearsals like soldiers before battle. Every line sharpened, every cue tightened. The scarlet bench became more than a prop. It became a symbol. A red wound on stage, daring the world to look. Meanwhile, Victor's silence grew louder. No new statements, no tweets. Just absence. which was worse than his threats because silence meant plotting. 2 nights before the big performance, I found another package at my door. Inside, a pristine playbill of Indigo City, signed in silver marker. The inscription, "Enjoy your 15 minutes." V. My hands shook. Rage bubbled hot, but beneath it, resolve solidified. If he thought 15 minutes was all we had, he was about to learn what an hour-long reckoning looked like. The day of the national broadcast, the auditorium was packed to bursting. Reporters, cameras, even strangers from out of state filled the aisles. My students peeked through the curtains, wide-eyed. "Ms. Keane," Amari whispered, "what if we fail?" I bent to meet his gaze. "Then we fail loudly. Together. And even in failure, the truth will echo." He nodded, shoulders squaring. The performance began. Scene after scene unfolded with fierce precision. Elodie's monologue roared. Jasmine's lights painted the stage in aching chiaroscuro. The audience leaned in, silent, drinking every word. And then, during my bench scene, it happened. A man stood up in the middle of the crowd, dressed in black, face shadowed by the lights. His voice cut through the silence. Lies. All lies. Gasps erupted. The cameras swiveled. My stomach dropped. It was Victor. He strode down the aisle, slow, deliberate, like he owned the floorboards under his feet. "You dare defame me with stolen scraps," he thundered. "You think the world will side with children over legacy?" The crowd murmured. Some shrank back. Others glared at him. I stood, notebook in hand, heart pounding so hard I thought my chest might crack. "These words are mine," I said, voice trembling but clear. "And so are theirs. You built a career from bones. We're just here to make the graveyard speak." The room buzzed with tension, cameras clicking like a firing squad. Victor's eyes locked on mine. Cold, furious. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll regret ever crossing me." And then he stormed out, leaving behind a silence heavy enough to crush. I turned back to the audience, to the cameras, to my students waiting in the wings. "Let's finish the show," I whispered. And we did. When the curtain fell, the applause was deafening. Not polite, not hesitant, thunderous. But even as I bowed with my students, my mind raced. Victor wasn't done. He'd just raised the stakes. And somewhere deep down, I knew the next act of this war would be darker than any Wed faced yet. After Victor's public outburst, the internet exploded. Clips of him storming the stage spread across social media. Memes mocked his arrogance. Articles dissected every word. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked rattled. Human. But I knew better than to celebrate. A cornered man doesn't surrender. He lunges. 2 days later, it came. A thick envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside, a summons. Victor was suing me for defamation, slander, and emotional distress. My knees buckled. A lawsuit meant money I didn't have, time I couldn't spare, and headlines that could destroy what little stability remained. Celeste read the papers with a cold fury. "This is smoke and mirrors. He doesn't want to win. He wants to drain you until you give up." Elodie leaned across the table. "So we don't give up. We fight." I wanted to believe her. But fear gnawed at me. What if this ended with me bankrupt, blacklisted, forgotten? The students felt the tension. They rehearsed with even more fire, as if every line might be their last. Amari whispered to me after practice, "Ms. Keane, if you walk away, we'll understand." I looked at him, at all of them, their faces young but fierce, already carrying too much. "No," I said, my voice steady. "If I walk away, he wins, and we can't let that happen." A week later, the court date loomed. Reporters swarmed outside the courthouse, cameras flashing. Victor arrived in a tailored suit, sunglasses, flanked by lawyers like soldiers. He smiled for the cameras, waving like royalty. I arrived with Rowan, Elodie, Celeste, and a few of my students who refused to stay behind. No suits, no army, just us, holding each other up. Inside the courtroom, Victor's lawyers thundered accusations that I was unstable, jealous, exploiting children for attention. Each word stabbed like glass, but then Celeste rose, calm, precise. She laid out the evidence, my notebook, Elodie's script, timestamps, the leaked recording. Each piece stacked like bricks in a wall too solid to ignore. And then something I hadn't expected. From the back of the courtroom, a man stood. Older, tired, his voice shaking. I worked with Hale. He stole my set design. I stayed silent because I needed the paycheck. But it was mine. Murmurs filled the room. Another stood. Then another. One by one, people spoke, lighting designers, writers, actors, each with a story, each with evidence. The graveyard had followed us into the courtroom, and now it was speaking louder than Victor ever could. Victor's mask cracked. He slammed his hand on the table, face red. "They're lying! All of them!" he shouted. The judge banged the gavel. "Mr. Hale, control yourself." But the damage was done. Cameras caught everything, and the world was watching. That night, back in the auditorium, I sat on the scarlet bench alone. The air felt different, lighter, but not finished. Because even if the lawsuit collapsed, even if the truth was out, the war wasn't won yet. Victor had power, money, reach. We had each other, and the truth. And the next performance, the one everyone was waiting for, would decide which was stronger. The courtroom drama had gone viral. Clips of Victor's outburst were everywhere. His red face, his shouting, his loss of control. For the first time, the public saw through his polished mask. But for me, it wasn't over. He still had money, lawyers, allies. The machine was still alive, and we had one last chance to strike. The final performance we'd planned, the one the entire world was now watching for. In the days leading up, the pressure nearly broke me. Parents pulled their kids aside, begging them to drop out. Rumors spread that Victor was planning to sue the school itself. Rowan warned me to sleep, to eat, to breathe. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. "You'll regret ever crossing me." Then Amari came to me backstage. "Ms. Keane, you always tell us theater is a truth-telling machine. So let's make this show the loudest machine ever built." His words snapped me back. This wasn't about fear anymore. It was about making sure the truth could never be buried again. The night of the final performance, the auditorium overflowed. Not just locals this time, journalists from across the country, live stream cameras, theater bloggers, even Broadway veterans. The world had come to Maplewood to see if we could finish what we started. Backstage, my students buzzed with nervous energy. Elodie squeezed my hand, whispering, "Whatever happens tonight, thank you," for giving my words back. I swallowed tears. "No, thank you," for trusting me with them. The curtain rose. From the very first line, the room was electric. The stolen monologues, the choreography, the lighting designs all woven into a living tapestry of defiance. The audience leaned forward, holding their breath. And then, the scarlet bench. My scene. The one that had started it all. I sat down, notebook in my lap. For a moment, silence wrapped the room. Then I spoke. These words were stolen, but words have roots, and roots don't die when you cut them. They grow back, stronger, louder. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I read every line, every beat, every confession. The students gathered behind me, one by one, until the stage was full. Their voices joined mine, overlapping, building into a storm of testimony. By the time we finished, the audience was on its feet. Applause thundered, people shouting, crying, chanting, "Credit the creator! Credit the creator!" The next morning, the headlines told the story. Victor Hale cancelled in court of public opinion. The originals bring down a giant. Sponsors pulled from his projects. The Tony Committee announced an internal review of Indigo City. And Victor himself silent. Vanished from social media. His empire crumbling in real time. That night, I sat alone in the auditorium. The scarlet bench glowed softly under the spotlight. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. The betrayal had once left me hollow, ashamed, erased. But now through the fire, the fear, the fight, I'd reclaimed more than just my name. I'd helped build something bigger. Because the truth doesn't die. It waits. And when the right voices speak, it rises. I touched the bench, whispering to the empty room. We did it. The graveyard sings. And this time, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like applause. For weeks after the final performance, the world buzzed. News cycles dissected Victor's fall, podcasts debated artistic ownership, and theater students across the country staged their own originals nights in solidarity. And me? I found myself quiet, not silenced, not erased, just finally able to breathe without fire clawing at my lungs. The school board eventually reinstated me. A weak apology, a stronger threat that I avoid extracurricular controversies. But when I walked back into the drama classroom, my students greeted me with flowers, banners, and applause that drowned out every bitter word it ever swallowed. I wasn't just their teacher anymore. I was proof. Proof that standing up mattered, even when it hurt. Elodie stayed in town longer than she planned. Together, we started drafting a new piece, a collaborative production built not on wounds, but on healing. She called it Afterlight. Because after the graveyard, she said, there's still the sunrise. I cried when she said it. Not because it was poetic, but because it was true. Victor's name faded from headlines. He tried mounting a comeback in London, but the internet followed him. Protests, cancellations, whispers louder than his PR machine. His empire hadn't just cracked. It had collapsed. I didn't celebrate. Not exactly. Watching someone fall doesn't heal you, but seeing him stripped of his mask that felt like justice, even if imperfect. One night I stayed late after rehearsal. The auditorium was empty, the scarlet bench glowing under the spotlight. I sat, notebook in my lap, but didn't write. Instead, I listened. The echoes of laughter, of lines shouted, of voices raised against silence. For the first time, the bench didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a seed. I don't know what comes next. Maybe more teaching, maybe more writing, maybe another fight. Someday, against another Goliath who thinks art is his to steal. But I do know this. I am not invisible anymore. And as long as I have a stage, even a small one in a suburban high school, my voice, and the voices of my students, will be heard. Because we're not just storytellers, we're originals. Months passed. The headlines cooled, the frenzy faded, but the echoes remained. I couldn't walk into a rehearsal room without feeling the weight of what we had done. The bench, the notebook, the voices, they were no longer just mine. They belonged to a movement. Emails began to pour in. Not threats this time, but pleas. A high school teacher in Chicago. My principal shuts down anything political. How do I keep my students' voices alive? A playwright in Austin. He took my script. Do I have to stay silent? A teenager in California. I want to write, but I'm scared someone will steal my work. How did you find the courage? I read every word, and for the first time I realized my story had become a map for others. Elodie and I started hosting small workshops in town. At first, a handful of kids in the library basement, then dozens. Then full rooms spilling over with artists clutching journals, sheet music, sketches. We called it the Originals Collective, a place where no story was orphaned, where credit was sacred, where voices weren't just heard, they were amplified. Of course, not everyone celebrated. Some industry figures grumbled that we were radicalizing students, encouraging rebellion. Others whispered that Victor wasn't the only one, that plenty of producers had skeletons rattling in their closets. And they were right. The graveyard was bigger than one man. One evening, after a long workshop, Rowan found me outside the auditorium, staring at the horizon. "Thinking?" she asked. "Always," I said with a tired smile. She nudged me. "What's next?" I exhaled. "We took down one predator. But there are more. Maybe this isn't over. Maybe it never will be." Rowan's eyes softened. "Then you teach them how to fight. You don't have to win every war, you just have to train an army that keeps going." Her words rooted deep. That night, I unlocked the auditorium alone. The scarlet bench sat waiting under its spotlight. I placed a new notebook on it, not sketches this time, but blank pages. An invitation. Because the future wasn't mine alone to write anymore. It belonged to every original still out there, waiting to be heard. And maybe the real revenge wasn't Victor's fall at all. Maybe it was ensuring no voice would ever be stolen unnoticed again. Winter melted into spring, but the fire never died. The Originals Collective had grown beyond Maplewood. What started as basement workshops was now chapters in 6 states, each filled with students, playwrights, designers, voices demanding recognition. I should have felt proud. I did. But pride is heavy when you know the battle is bigger than you imagined. It happened on a Tuesday. An email from a theater intern in New York. "They're doing it again. A producer is mounting a new musical. The choreography? It's mine." I showed it in a workshop. They copied it step for step. "I don't know what to do. Please help." I stared at the screen. My pulse quickened. Another Victor. Another graveyard. And maybe this was always the truth. Victor wasn't an outlier. He was a symptom. Elodie leaned over my shoulder as I reread the email. She whispered, "You know this won't stop, right? It's not just him. It's the system. It feeds on silence." Her words sank deep. For months, I'd told myself the war was over, but maybe we'd only fought one battle in a much larger war. That night, we called a meeting. The auditorium filled with students, allies, artists. Rowan stood at the back, arms folded, her eyes shining with pride and worry. I spoke from the scarlet bench. "We started this fight for one reason, to take back our voices. But now we know it's not one thief. It's an industry that rewards theft. If we stop here, others will suffer in silence. So the question is, do we fight on?" The room was quiet for a heartbeat. Then Amari raised his hand. "All the way," he said. Voices followed: Elodie, Jasmine, dozens more. A chorus. And in that moment, I knew. The originals weren't just survivors anymore. We were an army. Of course, an army needs a plan. Celeste warned us. If you take on the system, they'll hit harder than Hale ever could. Blacklists, lawsuits, smear campaigns. This will get ugly. I met her gaze. So did Hale, and we survived. Rowan stepped forward. "Then we start with exposure. If these producers thrive on secrecy, we burn light into every corner." That week, we launched the Originals Archivin online database for artists to register their works, time-stamped, verified, impossible to erase. We invited stories, documents, testimony. Within days, hundreds submitted. Within weeks, thousands. Each entry was a match. Together, they became a wildfire. But with fire comes smoke. Late one night, as I was uploading submissions, my computer froze. Then the screen went black. A single message blinked across it. Stop, or you'll wish you had. The machine shut down. My reflection stared back in the dark glass, pale and shaken. The graveyard had stirred the system, and now it was looking back at me. The message on my computer screen haunted me for days. Stop, or you'll wish you had. It wasn't Victor. His empire was already crumbling. This was someone else. Something else. And suddenly, the enemy felt larger than one man. It was the system itself. Faceless, but everywhere. Celeste confirmed my fears. They hacked you, she said, scanning my laptop. This isn't a random troll. This is organized. Someone doesn't want the original's archive to exist. Who? I asked. She shook her head grimly. Could be anyone. A producers guild. A consortium. People with money to lose if artists start demanding credit. Her words hit like thunder. We'd rattled the cage, and now the beast inside was stirring. But if they thought fear would stop us, they hadn't learned who we were. At the next meeting, I showed the students the hacked screen. They gasped. Some frightened, some furious. This means we're making a difference, I said. If they weren't scared, they wouldn't fight back. So we don't back down, we double down. Elodie's eyes blazed. Then let's make the archive impossible to erase. The collective rallied. Jasmine recruited coders from the tech club to strengthen the archive with encryption. Amari organized volunteers to scan and upload physical work. Rowan reached out to journalists to spread the word wider. Every act of defiance felt like placing another stone in a fortress. But the more we built, the more the pressure grew. Anonymous messages, threatening emails, even strangers following me on the street. One evening, as I walked home, a black car slowed beside me. The tinted window slid down, and a man's voice called out, "You're in over your head, Keane. Walk away while you can." Then the car vanished into the night. Fear clawed at me. For a moment, I wanted to run, to leave it all behind, retreat to safety. But when I opened the auditorium doors, my students were there, rehearsing under the dim lights, their voices echoing strong and certain. They weren't running. How could I? That weekend we staged another performance, not of our old stolen work, but something new. A piece entirely written by the collective. Original scenes, songs, dances, stitched into a defiant declaration, we will not be silenced. The audience packed the auditorium, spilling into hallways. The energy was wildfire. Cameras streamed it live. And in the middle of it, I sat on the scarlet bench, watching as my students performed not out of anger, but pride. For the first time, our story wasn't just about reclaiming what was stolen. It was about creating a future no one could steal. But backstage, Celeste's face was grim. "They're not going to let this go," she whispered. "Who?" I asked. She glanced at her phone, showing me an anonymous email. "You've declared war. Prepare for casualties." The auditorium roared with applause outside, but inside, I felt the chill of a truth I couldn't ignore. The war had only just begun. The anonymous threats had sharpened into a pattern. Emails, surveillance, a car that trailed me 3 blocks before vanishing. It wasn't random. It was coordinated. Celeste gathered us in the auditorium one night, the scarlet bench at the center like always. "This isn't just intimidation," she said. "It's a network, someone powerful, and I think I know who." The room went still. She laid out a folder stuffed with documents, articles, leaked memos, donor lists. At the top, a name repeated like a drumbeat: the Eastbrook Consortium. "They fund half the Broadway season," Celeste explained, "a circle of producers, investors, and talent brokers. And Victor was one of their golden boys. If his downfall sets a precedent, every one of them is at risk." The truth landed like a stage light crashing to the floor. Victor had been a monster, but he wasn't the only one. He was a soldier in a much larger army. Elodie whispered, So they're coming after us to protect their machine. Rowan folded her arms. Then we don't just fight one thief, we take on the factory that makes thieves. The room buzzed with both terror and determination, because now the graveyard wasn't just a metaphor. It was an empire. The collective voted unanimously. We wouldn't stop. But how do you fight a consortium with millions of dollars and friends in every boardroom? Jasmine had the answer. Expose them. Not just with words with proof. We build a case so solid the world can't look away. She leaned forward, fire in her eyes. But we'll need allies outside theater. Lawyers, hackers, journalists. If we're small, we need to grow louder. Within weeks, whispers spread. Former assistants, stagehands, interns contacted us with stories, contracts altered, credits erased, voices buried. Each testimony pointed back to the consortium. The original's archive swelled, not just with art but with evidence, a shadow history of Broadway, finally given light. But the consortium noticed. One night after rehearsal, I returned home to find my front door ajar. I froze. Inside, nothing was stolen. But on the kitchen table sat a single playbill. Not Indigo City this time. A new show. One I'd never heard of. Title: The Forgotten Choir. I flipped it open. The names inside weren't mine, but the script fragments were familiar. Too familiar. They were students. Lines from Elodie, choreography from Amari, even a lighting cue from Jasmine. And on the last page, scrawled in black ink, "Try and stop us." I dropped the playbill, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about my past anymore. They were stealing from the collective right now. The graveyard wasn't only old bones. It was still being dug. I sat on the scarlet bench, staring at the playbill under the harsh stage lights. My chest ached with fury, but beneath it burned resolve. If they thought they could scare us into silence, they'd forgotten one thing. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were originals. And we were ready to burn the factory down. The playbill sat on my desk like a threat and a challenge. The Forgotten Choir. Not just another theft, this was an open taunt. They wanted us to know. They wanted us powerless. But if the consortium thought we'd fold, they hadn't been paying attention. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting in the auditorium. The scarlet bench was crowded: Elodie, Amari, Jasmine, Rowan, Celeste, and half the collective. I held up the playbill. They're stealing from us in real time. This isn't history anymore. It's happening now. And they're daring us to stop them. Gasps rippled through the room. Amari slammed his fist on the bench. So we do stop them. We crash the show. Elodie leaned forward. Not crash. Expose. If we storm in like rebels, they'll paint us as vandals. But if we show the world, live, that the script is ours, they won't be able to hide. Celeste nodded slowly. She's right. We need receipts. Drafts, files, rehearsal videos. Then we leak them strategically. Not to blogs, not to gossip rags. Straight to the biggest outlets. Rowan crossed her arms. And while they scramble to defend themselves, you make noise. Bigger than before. Perform our version of The Forgotten Choir before they can even premiere theirs. The room fell into stunned silence. Then Jasmine grinned. Bootleg their bootleg? I love it. The plan took shape. We dug into laptops, notebooks, rehearsal footage. Every scrap of evidence went into the archive. Lawyers sympathetic to our cause agreed to review it. Journalists circled, hungry for a story. Meanwhile, rehearsals began. Elodie rewrote scenes, sharpening the script into a blade. Amari drilled the choreography, determined to make it undeniable. Jasmine lit the stage like fire, every cue carved from her soul. And me? I sat on the scarlet bench, notebook in hand, realizing this fight had become something bigger than my own redemption. It was about protecting the future. But the consortium wasn't blind. 2 nights before our planned performance, The auditorium doors were found padlocked, chains heavy, bolts sealed. A notice slapped across the entrance. Unsafe for use. Closed until further inspection. The students crowded around in shock. They shut us down, Jasmine whispered. No, I said, fire in my chest. They just gave us a bigger stage. The next evening, we moved the entire show outside, the town square, the same place we'd performed months earlier. But this time, it wasn't just locals. News crews lined the sidewalks. Livestream rigs were everywhere. As the sun set, the scarlet bench was carried out and placed in the center of the square. A symbol. A defiance. I took the stage, my students behind me, and lifted the playbill high. This is theirs, I said, voice shaking with fury. But these words, these dances, these lights, they are ours. Tonight, you'll see the truth before their lies ever reach Broadway. The crowd erupted in cheers, cameras rolled, the square became a stage, and the world became our audience. Halfway through the performance, as Amari leapt across the stage in a piece unmistakably his, I spotted them. Men in suits at the edge of the crowd, watching with cold eyes, phones raised. Consortium men. They weren't stopping us. Not yet. But I knew, deep in my bones, they were planning their counterattack. And whatever it would be brutal. The performance in the town square lit up the internet. Clips of Amari's choreography went viral. Elodie's lines were quoted across TikTok. Headlines declared, "High School Collective outsmarts Broadway machine." For a moment, it felt like we had the upper hand. But then, the hammer dropped. 2 days later, Rowan burst into the auditorium with her phone in hand. Her face was pale. "They're suing the archive." "What?" I asked. "The consortium. They filed an injunction claiming you're hosting stolen materials. They're trying to get the whole site shut down." My stomach dropped. They were turning our weapon against us. Celeste slammed her laptop shut. Of course. Classic strategy accuse us of the very crime we're exposing. If the archive goes offline, so does the evidence. They want to erase the proof before the world can connect the dots. Elodie shook her head in disbelief. "But it's our work. How can they sue us for our own words?" "Because they have money," Rowan muttered. "And money makes fiction sound like fact." The next week was chaos. News outlets ran with the lawsuit, some framing us as reckless kids who pirated material from professionals. Anonymous accounts flooded our socials, calling us thieves. I watched my students wilt under the pressure. Amari stopped posting online. Jasmine cried during rehearsal. Elodie snapped at everyone, her frustration boiling over. I sat on the scarlet bench, notebook closed, feeling the weight of their fear pressing into me. For the first time, I wondered had I dragged them too far into a war they couldn't survive? But then a message landed in my inbox. A video file. No sender listed. Just a play button. I clicked. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. A consortium board meeting. Men and women in suits around a long mahogany table. And Victor disheveled, diminished, sitting silently at the far end. A voice spoke. "We can't let this archive survive. If these children win, the entire system collapses. So we bury them. By any means necessary." The video ended. I stared at the screen. Breath caught in my throat. Proof. Not just of their thefts, but of their conspiracy to destroy us. I forwarded it to Celeste immediately. She replied in seconds. "If this is real, it's dynamite. But if they know you have it, they'll come harder than ever." That night, the auditorium was nearly empty. Just me, Rowan, and the scarlet bench. Rowan asked softly, "Do you want to stop?" I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "I can't. Not now. Not when the truth is finally in our hands." She squeezed my hand. "Then brace yourself. Because they won't just fight in the courts anymore." And she was right. When I left the auditorium, my car windows were smashed. On the driver's seat sat a note, written in thick black ink. "You've gone too far. Next time, it won't be glass." The smashed glass still glittered on my car seat the next morning, but I drove anyway. Fear rode beside me, silent, but I refused to let it steer. By the time I reached the auditorium, the collective was already there. The scarlet bench was surrounded by students: Rowan, Celeste, Elodie, Jasmine, Amari, all waiting for me. I held up my phone. "We have proof," I said. "A video of the consortium plotting to bury us. But if we release it, they'll come harder than ever. Maybe harder than we can handle." The room buzzed with whispers. Amari clenched his fists. "Then release it." Elodie bit her lip. "But if it's traced back to us, they'll crush us in court before it even spreads." Jasmine shook her head. "Not if we make it impossible to erase. If it's everywhere before they react, they can't kill it." Celeste's eyes were sharp. "You're talking about going nuclear. Once we hit upload, there's no turning back. No half measures." Rowan's voice was steady. "So the question is, do you want survival or justice?" All eyes turned to me. My throat tightened. For years, I'd lived invisible. For months, I'd fought for scraps of recognition. But this was about more than me. I looked at my students, at their defiant faces, at the scarlet bench that had carried our story through fire. "Justice," I said. "Always justice." We moved fast. Jasmine mirrored the file across dozens of servers. Elodie drafted a public statement. Amari and the tech kids prepped the livestream. Celeste contacted journalists. Embargo lifted, ready to explode the second the video went live. As midnight neared, the auditorium glowed with screens, wires, and adrenaline. Rowan gripped my hand. "Once you do this, they won't stop. They'll come for you. Personally." I squeezed back. "Then let them." At the stroke of midnight, we went live. The video rolled. The consortium meeting, their voices cold, plotting to erase us. The world watched in real time as their mask cracked. The chat flooded shock, fury, solidarity. Hashtags erupted. Hashtag expose the consortium. Hashtag originals unite. Within minutes, the video spread across platforms. Within hours, it was headline news. But even as the collective celebrated, my phone buzzed. A new message. No number. Just text. "You wanted justice. Now you'll pay the price." And attached an address. My address. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. The students kept cheering, unaware. Rowan caught my expression, her smile fading. "They know where you live," she whispered. The applause outside the live stream cameras roared, but all I heard was silence pressing in. Because now, the war wasn't just public. It was personal.